The storm was relentless, the rain beating down like a drum on the African plains. And there, in the middle of the chaos, a lioness cried for her cub, a sound that no human should ever hear. One ranger's choice to step into danger would change everything, challenging the boundaries between human courage and the wild instincts of Africa's most powerful predators. If you love stories of courage, wildlife, and incredible moments in nature, stay with us. Watch till the end, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to follow more extraordinary animal rescues and adventures in the wild. The skies over the Serengeti darkened with a heaviness that pressed on the land like an unspoken warning. Lightning split the horizon in jagged brilliance, illuminating the rolling plains and distant acacia trees, and the low rumble of thunder echoed through the valley. Michael Lawson gripped the wheel of his mud-splattered Land Rover, eyes scanning the horizon for the first drops of rain that had begun to patter against the roof. After 15 years of patrolling the Ngorongoro Conservation Area in Tanzania, he had developed a sixth sense for the moods of the wild. Not just the unpredictable weather, but the subtle signals that indicated life and death were unfolding somewhere across the vast landscape. His boots had grown accustomed to the treacherous red mud, the way it clung to the tires of his vehicle and refused to let go. Michael had been born in Manchester, England, and yet, after arriving for what was meant to be a 6-month research project, he had never left Africa. The plains, the rhythm of rainfall, the scent of dust rising in the heat, they had become his home. The wild had claimed him, shaping him in ways the streets of his childhood never could. He had witnessed births, deaths, droughts, flood, and the delicate dance of predators and prey. And now, something in the air, a tension heavier than the storm itself, made him grip the steering wheel tighter. A crackle of static cut through the soft sound of rain on metal, followed by a voice. Sarah Mbeki, the night dispatcher. Base to Ranger 1, come in. Ranger 1 here. Go ahead, Sarah, he responded, keeping his eyes on the rising clouds. We've got a report from a safari guide near the Eastern Basin. Says there's a lioness acting strangely, making unusual vocalizations. Might be injured. The guide had to leave his group as the storm approached, but marked the GPS coordinates. Michael's pulse quickened. The Eastern Basin was a stretch of scattered acacia trees and seasonal watering holes, prime hunting and resting territory for the lion prides he had spent his career monitoring. He checked his watch, 6:43. Darkness would fall within the hour, and the storm's advance would render visibility nearly impossible. Standard protocol dictated he should return to base, organize a proper assessment team, and wait for daylight. Yet something about the urgency in Sarah's voice, combined with his own intuitive sense of the wild, pushed him to reconsider. Send me the coordinates, he said, after a measured pause. I'll do a quick check before the storm hits fully. I'm already in the eastern sector. Static answered him as Sarah transmitted the numbers. Michael, Dr. Kamani says it's going to be a bad one, she warned. Tension clear even through the interference. I understand, he replied. I'll report back immediately. No heroics. Promise. He adjusted the Land Rover's course, rain intensifying in sheets as he navigated the increasingly treacherous terrain. The Ngorongoro Conservation Area sprawled across more than 8,000 square kilometers, encompassing volcanic craters, dense forests, and open plains. Driving in these conditions was never easy, but familiarity had bred a careful confidence. Every pothole, every slick patch of mud, had been memorized through years of patrol. Yet the storm demanded absolute attention, and Michael felt it in every tense muscle of his body. Memories of the area came unbidden. He remembered the time a pride had hunted at dusk, and he had witnessed the delicate choreography of life and death, the sheer efficiency of predator and prey. He recalled poaching incidents that haunted his sleep for months, and rare, triumphant moments where the ecosystem had survived another season against human encroachment. All of this, the triumphs and tragedies, had shaped his understanding. Every decision carried weight. Every movement mattered. As he approached a shallow depression where a seasonal stream cut a small valley into the landscape, his headlights picked up faint shapes that made him instinctively slow the vehicle. 2 adult lionesses and a small cub lay partially hidden in the mud and shadow. Michael killed the engine, leaving the headlights casting long, trembling beams across the rain-drenched terrain. He lifted his binoculars, studying the scene. The cub lay motionless, half submerged in water that had begun pooling from the storm runoff. One lioness nudged it with her nose, releasing a high-pitched sound that didn't fit any vocalization Michael had ever cataloged in his 15 years of observing lions. It was an almost plaintive, whale-like call interspersed with the typical rumblings of lion communication, a sound of deep distress that clutched at his chest. The second adult stood guard a few meters away, eyes scanning the rain-darkened horizon. Michael lowered his binoculars, whispering to himself, "She's calling to it, and it's not responding." Reaching for the radio, he reported in measured tones, "Ranger 1 to base. I've located the lions. 2 adult females and 1 cub. The cub appears unresponsive. 1 lioness displays unusual distress behaviors." After a tense pause, Sarah's voice returned. "Dr. Kimani wants to know if you can determine what's wrong without approaching." Michael studied the scene. The cub's position and the mother's frantic nudges painted a picture of imminent tragedy. "Negative, Hurt," he replied. "I can't tell from this distance. The behavior of the mother is extremely atypical. I've never seen anything like it." Another pause before instructions arrived. "Maintain distance. Return to base. Veterinary team will be dispatched at first light if weather permits." Michael's hand hovered over the radio. The storm, the rising water, and the mother's growing distress were all urging him to act. Protocol had never accounted for the emotional gravity of witnessing a mother in potential despair, or a cub at the edge of death. He had faced dangers before, but the pull of this situation, emotional, ethical, and instinctual, was different. Through the curtain of rain, the mother lioness's eyes met his, an expression that seemed to transcend species. Something desperate and pleading shone in them. Michael exhaled slowly. Standard operating procedure would demand patience and distance. But protocol also included Provision 5.7, a rarely invoked rule allowing rangers to make emergency field decisions when animal life was immediately at risk. His boots sank slightly into the soft mud as he reached for the emergency veterinary kit. The storm's roar filled the silence as he zipped up his rain gear and checked the tranquilizer pistol, ensuring it was loaded with a mild sedative, not to incapacitate, but to create a measure of safety should the mother react unpredictably. In his other hand, he gripped a large umbrella, not for rain, but as a visual shield, a bluff against the natural intimidation of the predators. Michael stepped slowly out of the Land Rover, every muscle alert, every breath measured. The mother lioness looked up, eyes never leaving him, but she did not advance. The second adult growled softly, taking a half step forward, but refrained from aggression. Michael froze, calculating every movement, feeling the tension of life and death in the rain-soaked air. For 5 seconds that stretched into an eternity, they studied each other. Then gradually the guard lioness took a step back. The mother returned her attention to the cub. Michael's instincts told him the time had come. He edged forward, each movement deliberate, until the first sign of the cub's condition became painfully clear. Half submerged, trapped between rocks, and helpless against the rising waters. Michael's heart raced. Every safety rule, every past caution, clashed with the singular, undeniable truth. This cub would drown if he did not act immediately. The storm was no longer just a backdrop. It was a relentless antagonist, threatening to claim the cub before his eyes. And in that instant, Michael knew that his choice would either mark a triumph or a tragedy. His decision hung on the edge of instinct, training, and sheer human resolve. The rain hammered relentlessly, drumming a chaotic rhythm on the mud-slicked plain. Michael remained crouched behind the shelter of the Land Rover, rain cascading down the windshield, eyes fixed on the small cluster of lions before him. The cub lay motionless, its damp fur plastered against its tiny frame, ears barely visible above the rising water. The mother nudged and pawed gently at her offspring, her movements precise yet frantic. Her vocalizations pierced through the storm, high, sharp, almost musical cries interspersed with the deep, rumbling sounds familiar to any observer of lion prides. Michael's heart clenched. Every instinct screamed that the cub was in critical danger. He raised the binoculars again, scrutinizing the mother's posture and the secondary lioness. The guardian adult remained tense, muscles coiled, eyes scanning for threats, while keeping a calculated distance. Michael had observed countless lion interactions over the years, but this was unlike anything he had documented. A mother protecting her cub was expected behavior, but the intensity and specificity of her responses were extraordinary. She wasn't merely defensive, she was communicating, problem-solving in real time, reacting not only to environmental threats, but to her trapped offspring's immediate peril. Michael crouched lower in the Land Rover, careful to avoid any sudden movements. The storm's roar made verbal communication impossible without a radio. He picked it up and reported to base, voice tight with controlled urgency. Ranger 1 to base. 2 adults, 1 cub. The cub is unresponsive, and the mother displays unusual distress. Immediate veterinary intervention may be required, though I cannot approach safely under current conditions. Static crackled in reply, followed by Sarah's voice. Dr. Kimani says maintain distance. Return to base. We will mobilize a team at first light. Michael exhaled slowly, but the tension in his chest didn't ease. His mind ran through scenarios, calculating how quickly the cub could succumb to hypothermia or drowning. The depression in which the cub lay had become a temporary basin, already gathering runoff from the torrential rain. Within minutes, water could rise past the cub's nose, and with no immediate help nearby, death was a very real possibility. The mother lioness seemed aware of his gaze, raising her head for a brief instant and locking eyes with him. In that flash, Michael felt something almost impossible to describe. A direct plea, a raw emotional intelligence that transcended species. He knew the protocol, knew that approaching predators in these conditions was considered reckless. Yet the scene held him captive. A mother in desperation, a cub whose life teetered on a knife edge, and 2 human instincts, professional caution and the impulse to act. He crouched lower, speaking softly to the animals, not expecting them to comprehend words, but trusting the rhythm and tone of his voice might convey calm. I see him. I will help, he murmured. It was a tiny act, yet it grounded him. In the wet, cold chaos of the storm, this communication became a silent pact between species. He would intervene, but cautiously, with respect and awareness of their power. Michael's mind flickered to the emergency protocols outlined in the Ranger Manual. Section 5.7 allowed for emergency field discretion when animal life was in immediate peril. It had rarely been invoked, reserved for situations where hesitation guaranteed death. He checked the tools in his emergency kit once more. A tranquilizer pistol loaded with mild sedatives, a large umbrella for visual shielding, and the first aid supplies necessary for field stabilization. Every item represented a lifeline and a calculated risk. As he watched, the mother's efforts intensified. She pawed at the cub with renewed energy, attempting to dislodge it from between hidden rocks. Each movement was measured, precise, yet born of urgency. The guardian female occasionally circled, alert but unthreatening, maintaining a perimeter while ensuring no predator or human could approach unnoticed. Michael realized that this secondary lioness's presence was crucial, a buffer that might allow him to intervene safely if he could time his movements perfectly. Minutes passed, each stretching into an eternity. Michael's training took over: assessment, observation, prediction. He mapped out the cub's position in his mind, the water's flow, and the likely next movements of the mother and guardian. The cub's hind leg appeared trapped between 2 stones, unseen beneath the water. The depression was filling faster, water rising with alarming speed, the small body increasingly submerged. Michael's pulse quickened. Even with all precautions, hesitation now meant the difference between life and death. He crouched lower, carefully considering approach angles. Every instinct screamed caution, yet his hands itched to act. The mother lioness, still vocalizing, pawed the cub with increasing urgency. Her tail flicked nervously, a subtle signal of heightened emotional and physiological stress. Michael could almost feel the cub's pulse through the thick air, its body cold and limp, and it ignited a mixture of fear, empathy, and determination in him. This is it, he whispered to himself. I can't just wait. The rain lashed harder, cold sheets plastering his rain gear to his body. Visibility dropped to mere meters, but he knew he had to act immediately, relying on his knowledge of animal behavior to navigate a dangerous, unprecedented scenario. Approaching predators is one thing. Approaching a mother lion in crisis while a cub is trapped in rising water is quite another. Any sudden move, any misread posture, and the outcome could be catastrophic. Michael's mind raced through the possibilities. Could he distract the guard lioness if she became aggressive? Could he communicate safety to the mother through his posture and movements alone? Every decision was a blend of instinct, experience, and ethical judgment. His gaze flicked repeatedly between cub and adults, reading subtle cues, ears pinned or erect, tail movements, low grumbles or growls. It was a language he had learned over years, a silent dialogue between observer and wild subjects. Minutes more passed, and the cub shifted slightly, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. The mother's vocalizations grew sharper, urgent, as if she sensed the window of survival closing. Michael felt the gravity of the moment weigh on him. This was not a controlled experiment or a routine patrol. The lives of 3 lions hung in delicate balance, and the storm's fury accelerated every risk. He took a slow, deliberate breath, centering himself. The rain, the mud, the roar of the storm, and the pressing weight of professional responsibility became background to a singular focus: the cub's immediate survival. Protocol dictated distance, but reality dictated action. Observation alone would not save this life. Michael glanced at the secondary lioness again. Her vigilance, her patience, her unwillingness to act aggressively unless provoked gave him a narrow opportunity. He calculated the safest path, movements measured and deliberate. If executed precisely, he could reach the cub, free it from the rocks, and retreat safely without triggering maternal aggression. The mathematics of instinct, risk, and timing played out in his mind with painstaking clarity. As the storm raged, the cub's survival teetered on a fragile edge. Every second counted, every small decision mattered. And in that instant, Michael understood the paradox of his role in the wild. He was both observer and participant, guardian and interloper, bound by protocol, yet compelled by the urgent demands of life. The tension mounted to a palpable crescendo. Lightning illuminated the sky, briefly revealing the mother's pleading eyes, the cub trapped and shivering, the guard lioness circling like a sentinel. It was a tableau of danger, emotion, and raw, natural instinct, one that would define the next crucial moments of Michael Lawson's life and career. The storm had created the perfect conditions for disaster, yet in its midst, a narrow corridor of opportunity opened. Michael adjusted his stance, ready to step into the downpour and act with calculated precision. The choice was now his alone. Hesitate, and the cub would drown. Act, and he risked everything, but had a chance to save a life that mattered more than protocol, more than rules, more than personal safety. The rain fell in unrelenting sheets, drumming a relentless rhythm on the Land Rover's roof, masking every sound of the savannah, except the occasional splash of water over puddles and the low grumbles of the lions. Michael paused at the edge of the small depression, assessing the situation one last time. The cub's body was half submerged, water swirling around his trapped hind leg. Time was merciless. Hypothermia could set in within minutes, and the storm's runoff was rapidly transforming the shallow valley into a makeshift river. Every instinct screamed that delay would be fatal. Michael shifted the emergency kit to his side, sliding the tranquilizer pistol into his belt. It was loaded with a mild sedative, a safety measure, not an offensive tool. His other hand gripped the umbrella, not as a shield from rain, but as a bluff, a way to appear larger and less threatening to the lions. Every step, every movement had to communicate calmness, non-aggression, and controlled intent. He exhaled slowly, letting the rhythm of his breath counter the pounding of adrenaline coursing through his veins. He moved forward with deliberate slowness, boots sinking into the mud with each step. His body was hunched, posture low, peripheral vision tracking the mother and the guard lioness. The secondary female watched intently, muscles tensed, prepared to react to any sudden move. Yet, surprisingly, she did not advance. Michael's careful movements were understood, or at least tolerated. The mother's cries continued, a mixture of high-pitched urgency and low rumbling frustration. Michael whispered softly under his breath, a tonal communication meant to calm rather than command. "I'm here. I just want to help. Trust me, little one." He knew the lions could not understand words, but they could perceive tone, intention, and rhythm. His heart thudded in his chest as he closed the final meters of distance. Finally, he reached the cub. The small body was slick with rain, soaked fur clinging to fragile limbs. Its hind leg was trapped between two jagged rocks, partially hidden beneath the swirling water. Michael crouched, assessing how to extricate the cub without causing further injury. He needed both hands, which meant abandoning the umbrella and placing the tranquilizer pistol in a safe, accessible position nearby. Every movement was calculated, every second measured against the potential for maternal aggression. "Stay with me," he whispered to the mother, who remained focused on her cub but had not advanced. Her eyes, wide and glistening with rain, seemed to pierce through him, a silent acknowledgement of his intent. The secondary female maintained her position, circling slightly, eyes never leaving him, muscles coiled like springs. The tension was nearly unbearable. One misstep could trigger instinctive defense. Michael plunged his hands into the icy water, feeling the slimy mud, the jagged edges of rock, and the small, trembling limbs of the cub. Its body was cold, limp, but still alive, tiny breaths barely rising above the water. He worked with painstaking care, leveraging his strength against the slippery rocks. The water rose steadily, now reaching the cub's ears. Every second was critical. Hypothermia and drowning loomed. He positioned his feet firmly, planted against the mud, and pressed his full weight against the largest of the rocks trapping the cub. The stone resisted, wedged tightly by the force of water and gravity. Another deep breath, then a shift, a grudging movement that allowed the cub's hind leg to slip free. Relief surged, but there was no time to pause. Michael lifted the soaked, shivering body from the flood in one smooth motion, cradling it against his chest. The mother growled low in her throat, a sound somewhere between warning and reassurance. She did not lunge, did not attack. She observed, unwavering, her entire focus on the cub. Michael's own pulse raced as he backed away, moving deliberately toward the higher, drier ground, where his rain gear offered some protection and where the Land Rover awaited. Every step was careful, measured against the potential for a sudden change in behavior from either lioness. Reaching the vehicle, Michael placed the cub on the front passenger seat, wrapping it quickly in a thermal emergency blanket from the kit. The small body shivered violently, teeth chattering, tiny lungs drawing shallow breaths. He checked the cub's airway and cleared any water trapped in its mouth and nose, gently adjusting its head to ensure breathing remained unobstructed. His training as a field ranger and emergency medic kicked in automatically. Pulse, respiration, temperature, and positioning were all critical. The mother lioness remained close, pacing alongside the vehicle, following his every movement. Her companion mirrored her, maintaining a precise perimeter that ensured Michael could operate without interference. It was unprecedented behavior. For over 15 years in the field, Michael had never witnessed wild lions responding to human intervention with this combination of vigilance, restraint, and situational understanding. "Steady," he murmured, speaking softly as if to reassure both the cub and the mother. He monitored the small animal's chest, feeling the shallow rise and fall of each breath through the blanket. Time was critical. The cub's condition was still fragile, hypothermia pronounced, and the storm unrelenting. Michael adjusted the heating system in the Land Rover, directing the vents toward the cub, using both tactile and thermal methods to raise its core temperature gradually. He remained hyper-aware of the mother's movements. Each rumble, each shift of weight, each pause was a message. He could not force proximity. He could only respect the instinctual boundaries that had been established. Slowly, imperceptibly, the cub's breathing deepened. A weak cough expelled water, and the chest rose more evenly. A flicker of movement in its eyelids suggested returning consciousness. Relief surged through Michael, but he did not relax. The mother remained vigilant, a constant reminder that the wild was never predictable. "Good, good," he whispered, massaging the cub's chest gently through the thermal blanket. "You're going to make it." His voice was low, rhythmic, intended to soothe both the animal in his arms and the mother outside. Each movement, each gesture, balanced on the knife edge between survival and danger. For over 20 minutes, Michael maintained this delicate operation. Rain streaked his face, soaked his clothing, and blurred his vision, Yet he worked with the precision of someone whose entire career had prepared him for such moments. Finally, the cub's breathing strengthened, chest rising more fully with each inhalation. Its tiny limbs twitched, and its head lifted slightly from the blanket. Outside, the mother lioness adjusted her position, lowering herself to sit near the vehicle, eyes never leaving her cub. The secondary female remained a silent sentinel, occasionally glancing toward the storm-darkened horizon but never breaking focus on the vehicle. Michael allowed himself a brief exhale. The immediate danger had passed. The cub was alive. Even so, the crisis was far from over. The storm continued to rage, the Land Rover's terrain treacherous, and the cub's condition, though improved, remained critical. Michael radioed base. Ranger 1 to base. Cub is stabilized, breathing regular but labored. 2 adults are following at safe distance, non-aggressive. Immediate medical support requested for full treatment. Sarah's voice returned, taut with tension. Acknowledged. Dr. Kamani is mobilizing emergency response. ETA 20 minutes if roads hold. Maintain distance and stay alert. Michael nodded, though she could not see him. He maintained a careful retreat toward higher ground, balancing the cub in his arms. The mother followed precisely, keeping the same measured distance, the secondary female flanking her. For the first time in his career, Michael felt the profound weight of interspecies trust. A mother lion allowing a human to handle her cub without violence, a silent negotiation of mutual understanding amidst chaos. As the Land Rover slowly inched towards safer terrain, the storm's fury seemed less threatening than the fragility of life in his arms. Each bump, each slick patch of mud, reminded him that survival depended not only on courage, but on precision, knowledge, and respect. The cub's survival, and the unexpected cooperation of the mother, would forever change his understanding of wildlife behavior, and set the stage for what would become one of the most extraordinary rescues in African conservation history. Michael carefully backed away from the waterlogged depression. The cub clutched securely against his chest, wrapped tightly in the thermal blanket to preserve what warmth remained in its chilled body. The rain pounded relentlessly, soaking him to the bone, but every sense was honed to the fragile life he carried. The Land Rover's tires sank slightly into the mud as he moved toward a stretch of higher ground, a safer staging area from which he could monitor the lions and begin emergency stabilization. His eyes never left the mother, who mirrored his movements in a slow, measured rhythm, maintaining a buffer of approximately 3 meters. The secondary female flanked her, a silent sentinel enforcing a cautious perimeter. The cub's chest rose and fell in shallow, irregular breaths. Its lips were tinged blue, a stark reminder of the hypothermia that had set in from prolonged exposure to rain and water. Michael's mind raced through the steps outlined in his field emergency protocols, but the reality before him demanded improvisation. The cub's life depended on immediate, precise action, yet every movement carried risk. Any sudden gesture could provoke maternal instinct, transforming the cautious observation into aggression. Michael exhaled, centering himself, and began methodically working through his assessment. First, the airway. He gently adjusted the cub's head, ensuring its mouth and nostrils were clear of water and debris. Tiny droplets fell from the blanket as he moved, mixing with the persistent rain. The cub coughed weakly, a shallow expulsion of fluid that sparked a surge of cautious relief. Michael's gloved hands traced the small, fragile body, checking for signs of trauma or broken bones. Aside from the leg that had been trapped in the pervasive chill, the cub appeared intact. Still, his tiny form trembled, every movement a delicate balance between life and further stress. Next, core temperature. He directed the Land Rover's heating system toward the passenger side, positioning vents to maximize warmth without creating sudden heat spikes that might shock the cub's fragile system. He monitored the cub's breathing, ensuring it remained regular, and massaged its chest gently, attempting to encourage deeper, more controlled breaths. Every movement was deliberate, slow, and synchronized with the storm's rhythm and the mother's watchful presence outside. Michael could not ignore the lions. The mother's vocalizations shifted from high-pitched distress to a low, rumbling observation. She circled and paused repeatedly, positioning herself to maintain visual contact without crossing into threatening proximity. The secondary female mirrored her companion, pacing silently but alert, eyes scanning the rain-swept savanna. The arrangement was almost ceremonial, an escort, a guard, a manifestation of maternal and social instinct that Michael had never before witnessed. It provided him a narrow window to perform life-saving measures, yet the responsibility weighed heavily. He spoke softly, a continuous thread of calm, rhythmic tones intended to bridge the gap between species. "You're safe now," he murmured, not for the cub's understanding, but perhaps for the reassurance of the mother outside. The words were meaningless to her, yet the cadence, the deliberate pacing, seemed to communicate intent. No harm, only help. Michael felt the odd but undeniable sensation that a fragile truce had been established. A mutual understanding forged in urgency and respect. Minutes stretched as Michael continued the painstaking work. He monitored pulse and respiration, small fingers tracing the femoral artery to ensure the cub remained viable. The mother occasionally stepped closer, pressing her large frame to the ground, Taman, releasing a low, resonant rumble that was neither warning nor threat, but a sound of vigilant observation. Michael noted it carefully. Every auditory cue held meaning. Every shift in posture a signal of her perception of his actions. Temperature continued to climb slowly as the heating system worked in concert with the thermal blanket. The cub's limbs began to twitch. First faintly, then with increasing frequency, small movements indicating a return of circulation and muscular function. Michael's hands remained steady, supporting the body while adjusting the blanket to trap warmth effectively. His eyes flicked constantly between cub and mother, noting subtle shifts. Ears flattened briefly, then returned upright, tail twitched, then settled. Each movement was a dialogue of instinct and observation. As the cub's chest rose more fully, Michael used gloved hands to gently pat the sides, encouraging deeper, more regular breathing. The tiny animal responded, opening its eyes partially, flicking them toward the overhead light and then toward him. The mother's behavior shifted subtly. She lowered herself to sit, head angled, gaze fixed on the vehicle, eyes tracking every movement inside. The secondary female remained vigilant but relaxed slightly, a testament to the mother's judgment of Michael's intent. Communication with base remained critical. Michael's radio crackled intermittently. "Ranger 1 to base. Cub is stabilizing, breathing improving, core temperature slowly increasing. Both adults present, maintaining perimeter but non-aggressive, requesting immediate veterinary team guidance upon arrival." Sarah's response was tense but reassuring. "Acknowledged. Dr. Kimani is coordinating emergency response. ETA adjusted for storm conditions, approximately 30 minutes. Continue monitoring and maintain situational awareness. Do not attempt extraction until team arrival unless life-threatening changes occur." Michael nodded, though she could not see him. Every second still mattered. The cub's breathing was irregular, still shallow, but it had stopped the intermittent gasps that had threatened its survival. Its body had warmed slightly, muscles responding to tactile stimuli, yet hypothermia remained a threat. Michael carefully repositioned the cub, tilting the head slightly downward to allow any residual water in the airway to drain safely. He rubbed the chest rhythmically, massaging warmth into the extremities without causing abrupt shifts in posture or blanket positioning. The mother's proximity created both opportunity and tension. Her presence reassured the cub indirectly while demanding vigilance from Michael. Any sudden gesture could trigger predatory instinct, and yet she allowed him to operate with astonishing patience. It was an unprecedented behavioral display. Wild lions allowing human intervention without aggression during an immediate life-threatening emergency. Michael marveled at the delicate intelligence of the interaction, knowing that each second of cooperation was a fragile, earned result of respect, patience, and instinctual understanding. Gradually, the cub began to vocalize weakly, tiny coughs and soft moans of consciousness. Its small eyes flickered fully open, revealing damp, amber irises. Michael allowed himself the smallest exhale of relief, but remained alert, hands poised to respond to any change. The mother observed the vocalizations closely, a low rumble accompanying each sound as if acknowledging her offspring's tenuous recovery. Michael adjusted the blanket to create a supportive nest around the cub, allowing the heating system to work effectively while keeping the small body stable during potential movement. Every touch, every adjustment, balanced the cub's fragile state against the necessity of survival and the ever-present presence of two large, powerful predators just meters away. The storm continued its relentless assault, yet a rhythm had been established. Michael, the cub, and the lions existed in a tense, precarious equilibrium. The mother remained close, vigilant, responsive, but restrained. The secondary female maintained a watchful perimeter, guarding against both environmental hazards and the unpredictable impulses of their own species. And within that fragile triad, a life hung in balance. But for the first time, survival seemed possible. Michael radioed again. Ranger 1 to base. Cub's vital signs stabilizing. Breathing more regular, core temperature rising. Maternal behavior remains non-aggressive, preparing for safe extraction and transport once veterinary team arrives. Static filled the brief pause before Sarah's voice returned. Understood. Maintain position and continue monitoring. Emergency team ETA approximately 30 minutes. All units aware of unusual lion behavior. Exercise maximum caution. Michael's eyes flicked one last time between the cub, now showing tentative signs of strength, and the mother outside. A silent bond, formed in the storm, lingered in the tense, dripping air. One could not call it trust in human terms. It was far older, older than protocol, older than science. It was instinct, empathy, and intelligence converging in the midst of a life and death moment. As he settled the cub more securely into the seat and adjusted the heating blanket, Michael allowed himself a brief reflection. In this field, patience, precision, and respect were as vital as courage. The storm raged, the terrain remained treacherous. Yet in this fragile window of calm, the cub's survival had become possible, and the extraordinary maternal restraint of the lions provided a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to witness nature's intelligence in action. The storm had not abated. Sheets of rain reduced visibility to barely a few meters, turning familiar terrain into a maze of treacherous mud pits and swollen runoff channels. Michael's Land Rover inched forward at walking pace, tires squelching through the red, clay-rich earth. Each small slip of the wheels sent a shudder through the vehicle, a reminder that a miscalculation could endanger both the cub in his arms and the precarious trust established with the adult lions outside. Yet despite the deluge, the cub's chest rose and fell more steadily, his small lungs responding to warmth and careful attention. Outside, the mother lioness followed with remarkable precision. She maintained a distance of approximately 10 meters, her large, wet body gliding silently over the mud as if it were dry grass. Her movements were deliberate, coordinated with the Land Rover's progress, yet fully autonomous. The secondary female flanked her, mirroring her companion's pace, eyes scanning the storm-darkened plains for threats. It was a tableau of wild intelligence and cooperation, a display Michael had never witnessed. He could almost believe they understood the critical mission. The cub must survive, and this human was now a part of that effort. Every bump in the terrain tested his focus. Several times, the Land Rover's tires slid on slick mud, forcing Michael to brake gently to regain traction. With each minor obstacle, the mother lioness adjusted her position, keeping the same distance without breaking the rhythm of her escort. Her gaze never wavered from the vehicle containing her offspring. Michael's heart raced, knowing that a single misstep could trigger instinctive aggression. He drove slowly, deliberately, hand firmly gripping the wheel, eyes flicking between the rearview mirror and the wet, glimmering forms of the two lions. The cub, for his part, remained fragile but perceptibly stronger. He stirred slightly in the blanket, his small legs twitching, weak vocalizations escaping his lips with each breath. Michael adjusted the thermal vents to increase warmth incrementally, careful not to overheat. He kept his body low, one hand steadying the cub, while the other maneuvered the vehicle over the uneven terrain. Each motion was carefully calculated, balancing speed, stability, and safety for both the cub and the adult lions outside. Michael radioed base intermittently, providing precise updates. Ranger 1 to base, both adults following at safe distance. Cub's condition improving, still critical, but breathing stabilizing. ETA to checkpoint Delta approximately 20 minutes under current conditions. Sarah's voice crackled back with tension. Copy that. Emergency team en route. All units alerted to unusual lion behavior. Maintain slow speed. Maximum caution advised. The road was treacherous. A low-lying section had flooded partially, forcing Michael to navigate around puddles that could easily trap the tires. The mother adjusted her stride, stepping lightly into the waterlogged mud with remarkable balance, her companion remaining perfectly synchronized. Michael marveled at their stamina. The storm had been raging for over an hour, yet the lions moved with unwavering focus, demonstrating a resilience that defied any previous scientific observation. The Land Rover slipped momentarily in a slick patch of mud, jolting the cub in his arms. Michael froze instinctively, holding the small body close and speaking in a calm, measured voice. "Steady, little one. Almost there." The mother growled softly, a low, resonant rumble that was neither threatening nor approving, simply a vocal acknowledgement of her cub's continued survival. As they progressed, Michael began to notice subtle cues in the mother's behavior. She occasionally paused, shifting her weight, scanning the surrounding plains. Each pause was intentional, calculated, yet she never advanced aggressively toward him or the vehicle. The secondary female remained slightly behind, flanking the mother, a silent observer and guardian. Michael realized that this was a form of cooperative escort, a remarkable adaptation of instinct under conditions neither natural nor routine. The cub stirred again, weakly opening his eyes. Michael adjusted the blanket, ensuring the fragile body was fully supported and the warmth retained. He noted the rapidity with which the mother responded to the smallest sign of movement from her offspring. Every twitch, every breath, every sound elicited a careful, measured response from her, reinforcing Michael's awareness of her extraordinary intelligence and situational awareness. Approximately 10 minutes into the journey, Michael encountered a wider section of flooded track. He slowed further, inching the Land Rover forward while scanning the surrounding area for obstacles. The mother matched his pace seamlessly, maintaining the precise distance that ensured both protection for the cub and space for Michael to maneuver. The secondary lioness mirrored every movement, creating a moving corridor of observation and restraint. The cub's breathing remained shallow but regular, and small coughs expelled lingering water from his lungs. Michael massaged his chest gently through the blanket, whispering softly, "Almost there. Stay with me." His voice was calm, rhythmic, a subtle signal meant for both the cub and the mother outside. The storm's roar made verbal communication impossible with Base, yet his updates over the radio kept Sarah informed of each development. Lightning split the sky again, illuminating the vast plain, and for a fleeting moment, Michael saw the full scale of the mother and secondary female's coordination. They moved fluidly over the uneven terrain, synchronized yet independent, a silent acknowledgement of the critical task at hand. The storm seemed secondary to their purpose. The cub's survival outweighed the fury of wind and rain, highlighting a level of intelligence rarely captured in observation. As the Land Rover approached a narrow, slightly elevated track, Michael glimpsed the first sign of the checkpoint delta in the distance, the glimmer of headlights through sheets of rain. His pulse quickened. The emergency veterinary team had coordinated a secure reception area, yet the approach required continued vigilance. One misstep, one sudden movement, and the carefully maintained trust between humans and lions could collapse instantly. Michael radioed once more. "Ranger wanted to base. Visual on checkpoint Delta. Both adults still following at safe distance, preparing for transfer." Sarah's voice carried relief tinged with tension. "Copy that. Emergency response team in position. All units on alert. Proceed with extreme caution. Lion's behavior being monitored. Maintain pace and distance." The mother continued her escort, eyes never leaving the cub. The secondary female flanked her, scanning the perimeter, occasionally glancing toward the distant checkpoint as if assessing the safest path forward. Michael recognized a subtle shift. They were aware, adaptable, and capable of assessing risk dynamically. He had studied lion behavior extensively, but this was an unprecedented display of coordination and comprehension. As the Land Rover neared the checkpoint, the terrain worsened. Deep ruts filled with muddy water required precise navigation, each careful turn sending minor jolts through the vehicle. The cub stirred slightly, small vocalizations escaping, and Michael adjusted his hold, ensuring the fragile body remained fully supported. The mother responded immediately, releasing a low, rumbling acknowledgement and maintaining her measured distance. Finally, the checkpoint came fully into view. Powerful spotlights illuminated the assembled vehicles, a secure area prepared for transfer of the cub. Rangers in full rain gear, armed with tranquilizer rifles and positioned strategically, created a perimeter that ensured both the cub's safety and the containment of the adult lions. Michael's heart raced, aware that the final steps were as critical as the rescue itself. He radioed base one last time. Ranger 1 to base, approaching checkpoint Delta. Both adult females maintaining escort. Cub stable but critical, preparing for secure handoff. Static answered before Sarah's voice returned. Understood, Dr. Kamani ready to coordinate transfer. Maintain current pace. Secure transfer protocol in effect. Emergency team in position. Michael slowed the Land Rover further, positioning it to align the passenger side with the central medical vehicle. The mother adjusted her stride to mirror his movements, flanking the vehicle precisely. The secondary female mirrored her, completing the formation. For over 20 minutes, they had moved together through the storm, navigating a landscape transformed by rainfall and treacherous terrain, each participant attuned to the others in an extraordinary display of interspecies coordination. As Michael brought the Land Rover to a controlled stop, the mother and secondary female paused a safe distance from the illuminated checkpoint. The cub, though still weak, responded to the environment with tentative movements. The emergency team readied the secure transfer, aware that one misstep could undo the careful equilibrium established during the perilous journey. Michael felt the weight of responsibility settle fully on his shoulders. The cub was alive, the mother and companion were still calm, and every decision from this point forward would determine whether this remarkable rescue would succeed completely. The Land Rover rolled to a halt beside the medical transport vehicle, its headlights cutting through the thick, persistent sheets of rain. Michael eased the cub into a carefully prepared nest of blankets on the passenger side, ensuring the small body remained supported during the final steps of the transfer. Outside, the mother lioness halted at the edge of the illuminated perimeter, her wet fur glistening under the floodlights, eyes locked on her cub with unyielding focus. The secondary female mirrored her position, forming a defensive but non-threatening arc around her companion. Michael's heart pounded, the tension from the journey persisted, but the sense of imminent success began to take root. Dr. Kamani, already on site in full rain gear, signaled Michael to proceed with the transfer. Her experience in wildlife medicine had prepared her for emergencies, yet even she displayed a hint of awe at the unusual tableau of maternal restraint outside the vehicle. "How is he?" she called over the storm, her voice steady despite the conditions. "Improved," Michael replied. "Breathing is stronger, still critical, but stabilizing. He's responsive to stimuli, though weak. The adults are maintaining position, following at distance but non-aggressive." Dr. Kamani nodded, assessing both the cub and the mother lioness. The standard emergency protocol would typically involve sedating or isolating the adults to prevent interference, but the mother's behavior complicated conventional procedures. She had demonstrated remarkable restraint, following every movement of the Land Rover without attempting aggression. Any sudden action, any misstep, could provoke instinctive retaliation. The team needed to adapt, to respect the lion's intelligence while securing the cub for medical care. Michael opened the passenger door fully, stepping carefully to allow the veterinary team simultaneous access to the cub. The mother remained seated, eyes following every movement. Her low rumble resonated through the rain-soaked air, a sound that seemed to carry both caution and acknowledgement. The secondary female maintained her vigil, eyes scanning the perimeter, muscles coiled yet calm. Michael felt the delicate balance of trust and instinct, aware that one false move could undo everything. The veterinary team moved with practiced precision. 2 technicians slid the cub gently onto a stretcher, carefully maintaining the integrity of the thermal blanket and ensuring the fragile body remained supported. Michael provided guidance, whispering instructions about subtle positioning and handling to minimize stress. Every movement was synchronized, a choreography dictated by both human skill and the lion's responses. As the cub was placed onto the central medical vehicle's surface, monitoring devices were attached: temperature sensors, oxygen monitors, and pulse indicators. Michael observed the mother closely. She shifted slightly, rising onto her front paws, craning her head to maintain line of sight with her cub. The secondary female adjusted her position, forming a protective arc around the mother, creating a human lion tableau of vigilance and care. The storm's roar faded into the background. In that moment, the priorities were clear: survival, observation, and respect. Dr. Kamani guided Michael and the team through the next steps. We need to ensure the cub remains visible to his mother while receiving treatment. Containment protocol. Sigma Phase 2 will allow observation without risk of aggressive interference. The mother must maintain visual contact to reduce stress and encourage cooperation. The team activated a series of low-intensity lights, leading the mother and secondary female toward the south observation area, a reinforced secure enclosure with viewing windows overlooking the treatment bay. Speakers discreetly positioned along the perimeter emitted soft recorded calls of a lion cub, mimicking natural contact sounds to guide the adults gently. Michael assisted, observing the lion's responses and adjusting light intensity to encourage forward movement without provocation. Minutes passed with agonizing slowness. The mother initially hesitated, pacing along the edge of the observation path, nostrils flaring as she scanned both the humans and the unfamiliar space. Her companion mirrored every move, instinctively calculating distance, pace, and potential threats. Michael noted every subtle shift in posture, every vocalization, recognizing patterns of decision-making previously undocumented in field observations. This was not mere obedience, it was situational intelligence, a negotiation between instinct, observation, and the unprecedented presence of humans. Finally, the mother began to move toward the designated observation area, guided subtly by the visual cues and recorded vocalizations. Her movements were cautious but purposeful, each step deliberate. The secondary female followed, maintaining a protective flank, eyes never leaving the mother or the general perimeter. Michael exhaled slowly, heart pounding from both relief and continued vigilance. He adjusted the cub's position on the treatment table, ensuring his line of sight through the glass window would align with the mother's perspective once she reached the observation area. Inside the treatment bay, the veterinary team continued stabilizing the cub. Hypothermia management, respiratory monitoring, and minor injury assessment were prioritized. The cub's temperature had risen gradually, and his shallow breathing became more rhythmic under controlled support. Michael noted the subtle improvements, reporting in real time to Dr. Kimani. Cub showing incremental progress. Breathing deeper, minor voluntary movement observed. Mother's position stable outside observation window. The mother's response was immediate. Upon entering the observation area, she approached the reinforced glass and lowered herself to a seated position, pressing her gaze against the window. Her posture shifted from tense alertness to something resembling relief. Michael felt an almost indescribable sense of wonder. This was a wild predator demonstrating situational understanding, comprehension of the human's role, and restraint beyond instinctual behavior. The secondary female maintained her vigilant flank slightly behind, ensuring the mother remained unobstructed while monitoring the surrounding plains. Rain streaked their fur, glistening under the faint illumination of the observation area. For Michael, this was a singular moment of observation, a cooperative interspecies interaction where communication occurred through posture, movement, and instinct rather than direct contact. Over the next hour, the veterinary team completed the cub's initial assessments. Male, approximately 5 months old, minor contusions from his trapped leg, mild water inhalation, no fractures or internal injuries detected. The cub responded weakly to gentle tactile stimuli, vocalization soft but present. Michael continued monitoring the adults through the glass, noting every subtle shift in behavior. The mother occasionally vocalized low, resonant tones, seemingly acknowledging her cub's presence and the ongoing human intervention. Dr. Kamani reviewed the situation, consulting Michael's observations. "This level of maternal restraint is unprecedented in wild lions," she remarked quietly. "They recognize the human's intent, but are fully capable of aggressive response. This is an ethical and scientific challenge. How to provide care while respecting wild instincts." Michael nodded, understanding the gravity of her statement. Every decision carried weight: the cub's survival, the safety of the humans, and the preservation of natural behavior. The containment protocol allowed them to maintain visual contact, reducing stress, while ensuring no direct confrontation could occur. As the storm gradually subsided, the mother remained seated, eyes fixed intently on the cub. The secondary female patrolled lightly, occasionally glancing outward, ever vigilant. Inside, the cub began showing more pronounced signs of recovery, small limb movements, deeper breathing, and occasional weak vocalizations. Michael adjusted monitoring equipment and thermal support to accommodate these improvements, aware that the balance between intervention and observation remained delicate. By the end of the first hour, the cub's condition had stabilized significantly. The mother had accepted the intervention, demonstrating cooperative behavior that challenged conventional understanding of wild predator cognition. Michael made careful notes, documenting every interaction, posture, and vocalization, a record that would prove invaluable to both science and future conservation efforts. Outside, the storm was easing. Rain still fell, but with less intensity. Michael watched the mother and companion, noting their continued attentiveness. Despite the long night, their focus never wavered. He allowed himself the brief internal acknowledgement of relief. The cub was alive. The mother's behavior indicated comprehension and restraint, and the next stages of care could proceed with cautious optimism. The first pale streaks of dawn had begun to pierce the lingering clouds, casting a soft light across the rain-drenched compound. Inside the veterinary facility, the cub lay on the treatment table, wrapped in thermal blankets, gradually regaining strength. His breathing was more regular, chest rising and falling with a steady rhythm, and faint movements of his small limbs indicated increasing muscular response. Michael Lawson remained by the side of the cub, meticulously noting each change, aware that every detail could influence the decisions for reintegration into the wild. Dr. Kamani convened the team in a secure conference area adjacent to the treatment bay. The storm had left the surrounding terrain slippery and unstable, but inside, a quiet sense of focus prevailed. The situation was unprecedented. Normally, rescued cubs underwent extended rehabilitation to ensure physical recovery and behavioral conditioning before release. Yet this cub had something rare, a mother and secondary female who had accompanied him throughout the storm, demonstrating restraint in a form of situational understanding that left the team both amazed and cautious. "We face a unique situation," Dr. Kimani began, her eyes scanning the assembled veterinarians and rangers. "The cub's mother has displayed behavior we rarely observe. Despite stress and threat potential, she has allowed human intervention without aggression. This indicates she will likely accept her cub back after human handling." Michael stepped forward, presenting his detailed field notes and observations. During the initial rescue and transfer, the mother maintained visual contact at all times. Her companion provided a protective flank. There were no aggressive actions toward humans, yet vigilance was maintained. "I believe this indicates the cub can be safely returned to the pride if we maintain visual continuity during reintroduction." The lead veterinarian raised a concern. "Physically, the cub is recovering, but he's still vulnerable. Early release could risk injury or predation. We need to ensure he's fully prepared for the physical and social demands of the wild." Michael acknowledged the concern. "True, but the continued presence of the mother outside the observation area mitigates some risk. Her proximity and engagement provide both behavioral reassurance and social context, which conventional distant releases lack." A heated but respectful discussion ensued. The team debated medical priorities versus behavioral ecology. Some argued for extended isolation and slow acclimatization, noting the risks of reintroducing a cub too early after severe hypothermia and minor trauma. Others, including Michael and Dr. Kamani, emphasized the unprecedented maternal behavior as a mitigating factor, allowing a more accelerated reintegration protocol. Every opinion was weighed carefully, the stakes encompassing both life and long-term ecological success. After an hour of deliberation, a structured plan emerged. The cub would remain under intensive monitoring for 48 hours to ensure full recovery from hypothermia and any secondary complications. During this time, the mother and secondary female would continue receiving sustenance at a safe distance, remaining visible to the cub but prevented from physical interference. This would maintain the mother's reassurance while allowing the cub to acclimate to human observation and veterinary care. The team devised contingency protocols for potential scenarios. If the mother attempted to breach the barrier, trained rangers with non-lethal intervention strategies would guide her back without escalating aggression. Michael and Dr. Kamani reviewed these measures in detail, emphasizing minimal human interference and respect for instinctual behavior. The guiding principle was clear. The cub's safety must be ensured without disrupting the natural social hierarchy or maternal bonds. Throughout the planning, Michael continued his direct observation of the cub and the mother. The cub's movements became increasingly deliberate, lifting his head, stretching weak limbs, and occasionally vocalizing softly. Each small action prompted a low rumble from the mother outside, a sound that seemed to signify acknowledgement, reassurance, and even pride. The secondary female occasionally patrolled the perimeter, maintaining vigilance without unnecessary interference, a perfect complement to the mother's behavior. Dr. Kamani addressed the team again. We will initiate controlled reintroduction as soon as the cub demonstrates sustained alertness, coordinated movements, and an adequate response to environmental stimuli. The release location will be near the site of the initial incident, ensuring familiar surroundings for the mother and minimizing disorientation. Observation windows will remain in place until transfer is completed to allow the mother to maintain visual contact. Michael added specifics from his field perspective. Transport will be deliberate, slow-paced, and highly visible. The mother and companion will likely follow if unobstructed, as they have demonstrated tracking capability and restraint during the storm. We must allow their presence during release, maintaining ecological continuity. The team discussed the logistics in detail. Vehicles would transport the cub in a specialized crate, positioning the cub's orientation toward open savanna upon arrival. Human personnel would remain at a respectful distance, avoiding any sudden or threatening movements. Monitoring equipment and cameras would document every aspect of the reintroduction, capturing maternal behavior, cub responses, and environmental interactions for future analysis. Every element of the plan sought to balance safety, ethics, and ecological fidelity. Michael prepared the cub for the final stages of observation. He adjusted the thermal blankets, monitored respiratory function, and checked vascular circulation in the limbs. The cub's chest rose more evenly now, vocalizations became stronger, and subtle limb movements indicated returning strength and coordination. Each indicator suggested that the timeline for reintegration could proceed without jeopardizing the cub's health. Meanwhile, the mother outside remained seated in the observation area, occasionally vocalizing in low tones. She followed each movement of Michael and the veterinary team with unwavering attention, her posture shifting subtly with the cub's responses. Michael studied her closely, noting the intelligence evident in each head tilt, ear flick, and rumbling vocalization. It was a clear demonstration of situational cognition. She understood the human's role, recognized her cub's condition, and adapted her behavior accordingly. By mid-morning, the cub had made remarkable progress. He could lift his head fully, respond to gentle stimuli, and vocalize in short bursts. Dr. Kamani reviewed his vital signs: temperature within safe range, oxygen saturation stable, respiration steady, and minor contusions showing signs of healing. Michael and the team agreed that preparations for controlled reintroduction could begin immediately after the 48-hour observation period. Plans for transportation were finalized. The cub would be moved in a crate specifically designed for predator releases, ensuring his orientation toward the open savanna to minimize disorientation. Visual access would be maintained through strategic positioning of observation windows and temporary barriers. The mother and companion's positions would be carefully monitored to ensure they could accompany the cub without risk to humans. Michael reflected on the process. The storm, the peril, the intervention, and the maternal behavior had created an extraordinary learning opportunity. Every observation, every nuanced behavioral response would be invaluable in understanding lion cognition, social bonds, and crisis response. Yet the ethical dimension remained paramount. Human involvement had been necessary, but the goal was always to return the cub fully to the wild, preserving his natural instincts and autonomy. Finally, the team scheduled the reintroduction. At dawn 2 days later, the cub would be placed in the transport vehicle, the mother and companion positioned nearby in observation areas. Monitoring systems would track every step, capturing behavioral data and ensuring immediate intervention if necessary. Michael prepared mentally for the moment, a combination of exhilaration, tension, and reverence for the balance between human intervention and natural order. The cub stirred, weakly vocalizing, and Michael whispered encouragement. Soon, little one. Soon you'll return to your family, where you belong. Outside, the mother responded with a low rumble, a subtle acknowledgement of comprehension. The interplay of instinct, intelligence, and trust had culminated in this delicate plan, poised to restore the cub to the wild while maintaining the extraordinary maternal bond that had persisted through storm and danger. The dawn broke over the eastern basin in a soft cascade of gold and pink light, cutting through the dissipating clouds left by the storm. The ground remained slick, soaked from the previous night's torrential downpour, yet the plain stretched endlessly, calm and expansive. The cub, now alert and vocalizing with faint, weak cries, lay secured in a transport crate. His thermal blanket was folded around him, maintaining the warmth he had desperately needed hours before. Michael Lawson and the veterinary team had arrived early to ensure all preparations were meticulous, knowing that even a minor misstep could compromise the delicate process of reintroduction. The mother and secondary female were positioned in the observation area approximately 50 meters away. They had been guided gently to this location the previous evening, using a combination of low-intensity lights and recorded cub vocalizations, ensuring the adults could maintain visual contact without creating a sense of human threat. Their positions had been carefully chosen to allow both freedom of movement and line of sight to the cub's crate, preserving maternal awareness and vigilance, while avoiding interference with the release operation. Michael knelt beside the crate, checking the cub one last time. His chest rose evenly, tail occasionally flicking in minor movement, eyes brightening as he responded to soft vocal cues from Michael and the veterinary staff. Small murmurs of approval passed between the team. The cub's recovery was exceptional, a testament to both the intensive care provided and the mother's continued presence as an emotional anchor. The transport route had been meticulously planned. The crate would be positioned to allow the cub to exit toward the open savanna, avoiding the human vehicles and any obstacles that could confuse or endanger him. The observation windows were aligned to provide direct sight lines for the mother, ensuring she could witness the cub's first steps back into the wild. Every detail had been scrutinized: terrain, lighting, distance, timing, and human movement. At 06:15, with all personnel in secure positions, the team prepared to open the crate. Michael's hands hovered above the latch, movements deliberate and measured. The storm had left the air heavy with the scent of wet earth and vegetation, mingled with faint odors from the mother and companion outside. These smells, so integral to a lion's recognition of family and territory, would play a critical role in the cub's initial reactions. On my mark, Dr. Kimani instructed. Observe but do not intervene unless absolutely necessary. Maintain communication at all times. Michael nodded, heart pounding. He opened the crate door remotely, stepping back to the designated safe distance. For a moment, nothing happened. The cub's large amber eyes adjusted to the early morning light. He sniffed the air, tentative, small paws shifting on the crate floor. The mother outside let out a low rumble, a sound of acknowledgement and encouragement. The secondary female mirrored her, maintaining a protective stance while keeping a watchful eye on the terrain. The cub took a tentative step forward, then another. His movements were cautious but deliberate, each paw placement deliberate as he adjusted to the open savanna under his own control. Michael and the team held their collective breath, observing the interplay of instinct, recovery, and environment. The mother's rumbling grew slightly in volume, synchronized with the cub's progress, a continuous dialogue that required no words but communicated safety and encouragement. Finally, the cub emerged fully from the crate. His small body trembled slightly, still adjusting to freedom and sunlight. Michael observed closely, ready to intervene with safety measures, but the cub moved steadily, each step more confident than the last. The mother advanced several powerful strides, closing the gap with fluid, controlled motion. Her presence was commanding yet non-threatening, a reinforcement of the social and emotional bond the cub had relied on throughout the crisis. The cub recognized his mother instantly. A burst of energy surged through him as he vocalized the distinctive greeting sounds used by lion cubs reuniting with their pride members. The mother's response was immediate. She lowered herself, nose to nose with her cub, scenting him thoroughly, ensuring recognition despite the foreign smells of human handling and medical equipment. The companion female joined seamlessly, creating a protective formation around the cub, signaling that the pride hierarchy remained intact and that the cub's reintroduction was socially sanctioned. Michael watched, transfixed. Every movement, every vocalization, every subtle shift in posture confirmed the extraordinary intelligence and adaptability of the lions. The cub, though recovering from trauma, immediately integrated into the formation established by his mother and companion. The team captured the moment on multiple cameras, aware that this sequence would be invaluable for both research and conservation documentation. For several minutes, the cub remained within the maternal perimeter, exploring the surrounding savanna cautiously, testing his strength and agility. Michael noted the fluidity of coordination between the mother and companion. Their vigilance extended to both the cub's safety and assessment of the humans in proximity. It was a form of risk management and spatial awareness that illustrated sophisticated cognitive function rarely observed in wild lions. Then, with a final glance toward the vehicles and humans, the mother led her family toward the acacia thicket marking the edge of their territory. The cub matched her stride, still cautious but increasingly confident. The companion flanked them, scanning for potential threats while allowing the cub full freedom of movement. Michael remained stationary, knowing that stepping forward would disrupt the fragile balance of independence, trust, and instinct that had been so carefully maintained. As the pride moved deeper into the savanna, their forms gradually merged with the tall grasses, amber eyes catching fleeting sunlight. Michael and the veterinary team monitored from a distance, ensuring that no unforeseen hazards disrupted the reintroduction. The cub, now fully engaged with his natural environment and protected by his family, demonstrated regained coordination and exploratory behavior. His initial hesitation gave way to natural curiosity, reinforcing the success of the carefully structured reintegration plan. The morning air carried the remnants of the storm, but the scene was one of triumph, not chaos. The mother occasionally paused, checking on the cub's pace and health, emitting low, rumbling communications that guided and reassured him. The secondary female continued her protective sweep of the perimeter, ensuring that the humans, vehicles, and environmental elements did not interfere. Michael observed the synchronized behaviors with professional awe, recognizing the rare opportunity to witness a fully documented, cooperative, interspecies crisis response. In that moment, Michael reflected on the balance of human intervention and ecological integrity. The cub's survival had required careful risk assessment, skillful action, and ethical consideration. Yet the ultimate victory lay not in human achievement, but in the preservation of natural instincts, family bonds, and ecological roles. The lions moved as they were meant to, with independence and social cohesion intact, demonstrating that successful conservation involves both empathy and restraint. By 0730, the pride had disappeared fully into the acacia thicket, leaving Michael and the team with a profound sense of accomplishment. The cub, once teetering on the brink of life and death, had been restored to his natural environment, guided by maternal intelligence and human facilitation without compromising his wildness. The team reviewed their observations, taking extensive notes and photographs for scientific documentation, recognizing that this event would contribute significantly to understanding lion cognition, social structure, and interspecies cooperation. Michael took one final look toward the now empty savanna, absorbing the quiet majesty of the landscape. The morning sun reflected off rain-soaked grasses, and a gentle breeze carried the earthy scent of wet soil and vegetation. He understood deeply that conservation was not about dominance over the wild, but about careful partnership, intervention when necessary, but always with the goal of preserving autonomy, instinct, and natural behavior. Weeks turned into months, and the eastern basin slowly healed from the storm's fury, leaving behind fertile plains and renewed watering holes. Michael Lawson returned intermittently to the area, not to interfere, but to observe, monitor, and document the pride from a safe distance. The cub, once so fragile and vulnerable, had grown noticeably, his limbs stronger, his movements more confident, and his interactions with the mother and companion female increasingly coordinated. The initial trauma of entrapment and hypothermia had left no visible scars, though Michael knew the lessons learned, both human and animal, would linger in memory for a lifetime. The pride exhibited normal social behaviors, integrating the cub seamlessly into territorial patrols, hunting practice, and early social learning. Michael observed the mother guiding her offspring through the savannah, showing him how to navigate terrain, avoid hidden dangers, and recognize environmental cues critical for survival. The companion female remained an attentive guardian, monitoring potential threats and assisting in teaching the cub the rhythms of lion life. Michael noted that the subtle interactions he had witnessed during the storm, coordinated vigilance, maternal communication, and protective positioning, continued to manifest naturally, reinforcing the cub's social and survival skills. Back at the ranger station, Michael compiled detailed field notes, documenting not only the rescue operation, but also the behavioral nuances of the adult females. The patterns observed, maternal restraint during human intervention, situational judgment in crisis, and post-rescue social reintegration, represented an unprecedented set of data points in the study of African lions. Conservationists and veterinarians alike marveled at the rarity of such cooperation, recognizing its implications for both practical rescue operations and scientific understanding. Scientific papers began to emerge from the combined efforts of the Tanzanian wildlife authorities, veterinary teams, and Michael's meticulous notes. Analyses focused on several key areas: the cognitive abilities displayed by the mother and companion female, the role of maternal presence in rapid recovery of stressed cubs, and the efficacy of human intervention protocols that respected natural instincts. The findings challenged previously held assumptions, demonstrating that wild lions possess a sophisticated capacity for assessing risk, cooperating across species boundaries, and making calculated decisions under pressure. Michael's observations, combined with photographic and video documentation, became a cornerstone of ongoing studies in predator cognition and ethical conservation strategies. Locally, the pride's survival became a case study in proactive conservation. The cub thrived within the ecosystem, successfully participating in hunting trials, territory marking, and social bonding exercises. Michael observed that the cub retained a cautious but adaptive attitude toward humans, a subtle imprint of the rescue event. Rather than dependency, the experience seemed to have reinforced natural instincts while creating a measured awareness of human presence. This delicate balance exemplified the goal of ethical intervention, saving lives without compromising wild behavior. Years later, Michael returned during routine patrols to the Eastern Basin and witnessed the full scope of the cub's integration. Now approaching maturity, the cub moved confidently alongside the mother and companion female, taking on increasing responsibility in territorial defense and pride coordination. The initial rescue had become a distant memory for the animals themselves, but the observational data recorded during and after the event remained invaluable. Michael realized that the long-term impact extended far beyond a single life saved. It provided a blueprint for future interventions, informed training for other rangers, and contributed to the scientific understanding of predator social structures. Beyond the scientific value, the story resonated deeply with Michael personally. He reflected on the balance between courage, protocol, and respect. The rescue had demanded immediate action, careful risk assessment, and unwavering attention to detail. Yet it had also revealed the profound intelligence and empathy inherent in wild lions, traits too often underestimated in conservation narratives. The lesson was clear: successful wildlife intervention requires patience, humility, and recognition of the autonomy and instincts of the animals themselves. In subsequent months, Michael shared his experience with new rangers, emphasizing that knowledge alone was insufficient. Observation, intuition, and ethical judgment were equally crucial. He recounted the moments of tension as the cub lay trapped in the depression, the delicate choreography of the mother and companion female during the storm, and the subsequent behavioral observations during medical care and reintegration. Each detail illustrated not only the challenges of fieldwork, but also the extraordinary potential for interspecies cooperation when humans approach the wild with respect rather than domination. The cub's successful recovery became a highlight in the park's conservation records. Photographs and video clips documented his growth, interactions with his mother, and participation in hunting exercises, providing tangible evidence of both survival and behavioral continuity. These records became central in ranger training programs, ensuring that future interventions would learn from the balance of minimal interference, ethical responsibility, and informed decision-making. Michael's experience served as a teaching tool, illustrating that life-saving actions could coexist with preservation of natural instincts and social hierarchies. Michael also reflected on the broader ecological implications. The cub's survival contributed to the genetic diversity of the pride, ensuring the continuity of natural behaviors and social dynamics within the ecosystem. The storm had presented a crisis, but the combined efforts of humans and the adaptive intelligence of the lions had transformed a potential tragedy into an opportunity for growth, understanding, and conservation advancement. Each element, the cub's medical care, the mother's cooperation, and the companion's protective vigilance, underscored the delicate interplay between human intervention and natural resilience. Over time, the story of the cub rescue spread beyond scientific circles. Wildlife enthusiasts, conservation advocates, and local communities became aware of the extraordinary circumstances and the careful ethical choices that allowed the cub to survive while maintaining his wild autonomy. The narrative emphasized hope, courage, and the potential for humans to act as guardians rather than conquerors of the wild. Michael's recounting highlighted the importance of observation, patience, and respect for instinct, inspiring a new generation of conservationists. By the 5th year following the rescue, Michael observed the pride fully integrated within its territory, healthy and socially cohesive. The cub, now a young subadult, moved with confidence and strength, demonstrating all the skills necessary to survive independently while maintaining bonds with his mother and companion female. The lessons of the storm, the rescue, and the careful reintegration had left no visible mark on the animals, yet the data, experiences, and ethical reflections would influence conservation practice indefinitely. Michael stood at the edge of the plains, watching the pride move fluidly through the acacia-lined terrain. He understood deeply that the success of this operation was measured not only by the life saved, but by the preservation of natural instincts, maternal bonds, and ecological balance. The cub had survived, thrived, and integrated fully, not as a product of human intervention, but as a testament to cooperation, intelligence, and resilience. He turned toward his vehicle, rain-softened mud clinging to the tires, reflecting on the lessons learned. Courage, empathy, observation, and respect had combined to save a life while preserving the essence of the wild. In the delicate dance of intervention and preservation, humanity's role was not to dominate, but to safeguard, to assist only when necessary, and to honor the intricate intelligence of nature itself. The story of the cub rescue would endure, recorded in field notes, scientific journals, training programs, and the memory of those who witnessed it firsthand. It became a symbol of hope, a demonstration of ethical conservation, and a profound reminder that even in moments of crisis, intelligence, restraint, and cooperation could bridge the divide between species. Michael exhaled, feeling the weight of years of observation, effort, and care distilled into this single moment. The pride disappeared into the sunlit plains, moving naturally, freely, and fully alive, and fully. And in that disappearance lay the ultimate lesson. The wild endures, resilient and intelligent, and humans can play a role not as rulers but as guardians of its continuity.